Today on Feminine Roadmap, we are going to be talking about sugar addiction. How do you know you are a sugar addict? How do you stop being a sugar addict? And what would happen if you were able to conquer being a sugar addict? Please stay tuned. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here today, and I have a very intriguing guest and topic. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Kathleen DesMaisons. She's a PhD. She's the president of Radiant Recovery and the author of the best-selling book, Potatoes Not Prozac, Simple Solutions for Sugar Addiction. So without further ado, let me welcome my guest, Kathleen, to the show today. Hi, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm great. I'm delighted to be here and talking about my favorite topic.
You know, it's such a big topic right now, sugar, and it's kind of causing a lot of fear. So before we jump in, because I'm like 150 miles down the road in my head, why don't we go ahead and start with who you are and what led you to write this book, because your first copy of this book was back in 1998. So why don't you take us there as to how this book came about?
Well, it started before that when I was running an alcohol and drug treatment center, and people don't get well. Whatever people say, treatment doesn't necessarily have a positive ending. And I was trying to figure out what we could do that would enhance what we were doing, and came across some information about the connection of sugar to alcoholism. So we started changing people's diets and adding that in, and had absolutely spectacular results. Just the success rate went from 20 to 90%. So that kind of got my attention, and I thought, I need to write about this. So I started a journey of, if I was going to write about it, I'd better have a PhD because nobody would take me seriously. So I quit my job and I sold my house. I moved into a one-room apartment, went back to school when I was 48. I was a sweet young thing at that point. And started doing some research about what was the neurochemistry of what we were seeing. And there wasn't very much in the literature because people weren't thinking about sugar yet. But there was enough to start making. I went into the heroin literature, and then I went over to the neurochemistry. And the fun thing was I wasn't in a traditional department where I had to do somebody else's work. So I really could do interdisciplinary, and I could read the heroin literature, and I could read I read articles about a guy who was using sugar for anesthesia for infants during circumcision. And what he did was test a drug that blocked the effect. And that drug was the same drug that they use in heroin overdose. And I thought, oh, how interesting. So I started following that. And then I finished the PhD. I wrote my dissertation on the effects of sugar and alcoholism, and decided that I needed to write a book. And so I did. And people got really excited about it. I mean, it was a big deal. And this was way before anybody was interested in sugar. But I kind of felt as if it was a God story, because I was a no one. Nobody knew me from anything. Nobody knew anything about sugar. But the people at Simon & Schuster got it. And that was in 1996. And so my agent said, well, I want to do an auction. I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, it means you'll get a lot of money. And I said, no, I want Simon & Schuster to have this book because they got it. And so that started the whole process. And really, I went from running a drug treatment center to ending up creating an international community of people who wanted to talk about this. And this was before there was social media. We didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have any of those things at all. And my web people said, what are you doing? What do you mean you want people to talk to each other? So we just started with something called E-lists, which was like all there was. We started with one E-list, and now we have a lot of people all over the world. And as I said to you earlier, we have people from Tibet writing me and saying, my sugar is out of control. I don't know what to do. How do I do this? So what became my own internal sense about this story being important, and I put everything I had, every dollar, every bit of vision, every willingness on the line to be able to, first of all, to write the book, and then to support myself to be able to. And I have never regretted it for a moment. So it's actually a fun story.
Well, you know what I love about your story is it's so courageous, really. I mean, you probably didn't feel courageous, but to believe in something so wholeheartedly that you were willing to sell everything, downsize, and go 150% into studying something. Because when you deal with addicts, I'm sure that's a very difficult field because, like your book said, I think it's like a 25% success rate.
Less before. Yeah.
And that's very difficult to deal with when your goal is to help, right?
Well, I'll tell you quite honestly, it was courageous, and I had the personal experience of dealing with that kind of addiction. I had gone through it personally, so it wasn't just an academic, I want to help people. This is, wait a minute, this saved my life personally. This changed feeling hopeless, this changed feeling. I never understood why I felt so inadequate, even though on the outside I was successful. I had I was a single parent. I raised my kids. I felt really good about myself. I was running a treatment center. I wasn't horrible, but I felt like a fraud. And when I took care of this piece of it, I felt like I could do what I was destined to do, which is to bring a healing message to people about things that at that point nobody knew anything about it. They just thought it was a joke. Oh, you have a sweet tooth? Oh, no. It's just like, you hide, you lie, you feel hopeless. You say every Monday you say it's going to change, and it doesn't. So the personal aspect of it was the driving force behind wanting to give back. So that's not, I don't think that's really in the books because it's kind of intimate to say this is where the vision came from, my own desperation.
Now that was your desperation with the sugar addiction yourself, am I right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, did you have any alcoholism in your home? Did you have that thread in your life as well?
Yes. My father was an alcoholic, and he died at the age that my oldest son is now. And I was with him. I was 16. I was with him when he actually died. And so I had an imprint, a personal imprint. Death by alcoholism is not a pretty thing. And I think that I stopped drinking very young because I had that imprint. And as I said, no, we're not going down this path. But I took out the alcohol, but all the rest was all still there. All the genetic vulnerability, all the wiring that made me feel inadequate, all the things that are in the book, that was in full bloom. And I didn't have a clue. And then the process of this is how we do stuff. Process of doing the PhD was unraveling a puzzle for myself. And one of the gifts that I discovered in that process is my ability to take very complex ideas and make them funny, make them accessible, give people solutions. I didn't know I had that. I just didn't know I had that until I started writing. And so I discovered in the process of my own healing something that was quite a gift back, to be honest with you. And that's only grown. That's gotten better over time. Maturity helps.
Oh, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What was your emotional process as you were studying for your PhD? Did you find yourself going through an emotional journey and healing on that side as you learned?
Yeah, I remember I was sitting in the library with this huge book on the neurochemistry of heroin addiction. and I was reading it. It was dusty in the library. It was hot. And I started reading about the emotional baggage that comes with the vulnerability to the heroin addiction. And I started crying in the library. I was sitting there with tears running down my face because what it said was that I wasn't a bad person. This wasn't a moral issue, that it was a biochemical reality, and that it wasn't even about alcoholism, that it was something deeper than that. And I thought, and I know that we can find a way to fix it. I don't know where that came from. Well, from grace, I guess. But that was my reaction to it, was just this profound pain and recognition. And then this sense of, okay, I'm up to that task, whatever's next. And so that became a driving force and meant that I didn't feel burdened or deprived or that it was horrible. It was just a joy to be able to, as you know, to find our path, to find what we're here for. And when you do that, particularly as a woman, then nothing gets in the way. Like, you just do it. So that's what's happened since then. And so at this point in time, to have an opportunity to update and redo the book, add to it. So it's like leaving the core, but being able to say, here's what happens. This is what happens to you, because now it's not just my personal story. It's the thousands of people that are talking to me every day who have exactly the same script, that if you do this, you get better. And if you get better, this is what happens.
What a powerful impact that journey has had in changing people's lives, because, I've often said that, food in general is something that you have to have. You can give up alcohol, you can give up drugs, you can give up cigarettes, right? Like, You don't need those to live. Not really.
That's exactly right.
But food is complicated, because we do need to eat food, and everybody's body is different in relationship to food.
Right.
And that's something I wanted to ask you about. I know in your book you talk about how some people's bodies are predisposed to sugar sensitivity.
Right.
So why don't you explain a little bit about what is sugar sensitivity, and how does someone know if they have that?
Okay, that's a great question. First of all, I want to say my bias is that food is not the problem. Food is the healer.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I want to be clear that I do not stand on the side that food is an enemy at all. So how do we know? I have the great chocolate chip cookie test. And I can do this. I once did this with 500 people in an auditorium. And I said, okay, if you walk into the kitchen and you're by yourself, you have to be by yourself so you don't get caught. And there's a plate of chocolate chip cookies that just came out of the oven, and they were cooked just the way you want them. And we all know what that means, because it's different for different people, but there they are. And the question is, would you eat the cookies? Now, people who are not sugar sensitive will be sitting there looking at me like, well, what do you mean? Would I eat the cookies? Like, am I hungry? The rest of us are laughing because we know that we would, by that time, have inhaled the whole plate. And we would hide the plate, whatever. But there's an emotional reaction. And it might be cookies. It might be chocolate chip cookies. It might be wine. It might be cereal. It might be bread. There's an emotional attachment to the physical effects of different kinds of foods. And it could be wine. I mean, and if you hit the right ping for someone, they will immediately know and can immediately self-diagnose. Or if you said, if you couldn't ever have French bread again, and they go, whoa, what? I don't know if I could do that. I mean, nobody ever responds that way to broccoli, right? It's just, it doesn't happen. But the diagnosis is self-diagnosis. You don't need a doctor. You don't even need a questionnaire. I mean, there's a questionnaire in the book. I don't know. There's 10 questions. I just made up 10 questions to comfort people. But I've never met a person who didn't know And maybe in the South they would call it a sweet tooth. And recently I've had a lot of people, the last couple of years have been really stressful for a number of people, who reverted. And they started using sugar. And it was first just a little sweet thing with their afternoon tea, and then all of a sudden they're back in it. And they're miserable. I mean, just what alcoholics say. It 2 weeks, and I was full blown back. And what do we do? And so it's biochemical. And the message, the ultimate message is that you're not a bad person. This has nothing to do with morality. It has nothing to do with your will. It has to do with how your chemistry turns on to the neurological effects of having the sugar. And I found that very comforting. It's not me. I'm not a bad person.
Now, I believe, if I understood it correctly, sugar kind of acts like an opioid in the system. Is that true for everybody, or is it just heightened in the person that's sugar sensitive? Like, is the effect of sugar common, but just enhanced in people that have sugar sensitivity?
That's a great question. The effect of sugar is the same. The intensity of the effect changes on a continuum of how you are neurochemically hardwired. So if you have lower levels of a brain chemical called beta-endorphin, if you have lower levels of that, your brain opens up more beta-endorphin catchers. And so you get a bigger hit when you eat something or do something that evokes beta-endorphin. You get a bigger hit. So a person who doesn't have that wiring will walk into the kitchen and look at the plate of cookies and say, I'm not hungry right now. Maybe I'll have one later. And the rest of us would walk in and go, I'm out of here. Like, this isn't a safe place for me to be. Put the cookies away, put them somewhere, anywhere. And what's really interesting is that I can diagnose a sugar-sensitive child by the age of 2, maybe even younger. And it's, do they cry for more sweets? Do they have a temper tantrum if they can't have a soda? I mean, the kinds of things that non-sugar-sensitive people just don't respond to. A sugar-sensitive person will pick up the menu at a restaurant and look at the desserts first. Or everybody at the table will order wine, and a sugar-sensitive person will be thinking about how beautiful the colors are. I mean, regular people do not respond that way. So, and it's really fun when you start seeing it and you take the moral charge off of it, that you're somehow bad if you're like this. Because, I mean, this is an aside. There's a whole bunch of wonderful things that come along with the package, like intuition, empathy, sensitivity, awareness, compassion. You get a package, and the relationship to sugar is just one piece of it. So it's not like we want to kill the package or get rid of it or beat it up, but we want to redirect it into more functional ways of getting good feelings than eating sugar.
It's really fascinating to think about how different people respond to sugar, because I do know people who, like, they might get on Weight Watchers and say, oh, this has so many points and I can eat all of it. You know, they kind of justify it by some kind of external measurement, but the reality is they can't stop until it's all gone.
Right.
And I've had women share that with me. It's like, if you it could be a bag of chips. Someone said to me once, if I open a bag of chips, I will not stop until that chip bag is empty. To them, you can't even open the bag. And it is difficult for people who are not sugar sensitive to understand. And that's, I think, where that challenge of you just need to stop, that simple kind of like, just knock it off and you'll be fine. And what you're saying is there's an actual physiological neurochemical system that's driving that addiction as you feed it. And it's all about healing the body through food to get to the place where that monster is no longer roaring at you all the time. Is that right?
That's exactly correct. And there's actually 3. It's a 3-headed monster. So that piece of not being able to say no, that is connected to a chemical called serotonin, which most people know serotonin connected to depression, for example. But it's also the impulse control that we have, the ability to say no. And so if we have low serotonin, it's almost impossible to say no. So the woman that you talk about who can't open a bag of chips because the switch, the say no switch, it's like stuck in on. And part of what we're doing in the process that I developed is to say, okay, let's oil that switch. Let's make sure that switch is functioning so that, one, you can trust that, God forbid, you were confronted with an open bag of potato chips, that your life wouldn't go down the tubes at that moment, that you could just laugh and say, could you just get that out of here? Or you'd give it to the dog, or you'd throw it in the trash. And it's not an all or nothing thing, like I'll die if I have a bag of potato chips, or I'll die if I eat a bag of potato chips. Like, you could eat a bag of potatoes, a little bag, and nothing would happen. And so for me, teaching people not to be in fear is if you understand what your brain is doing and you understand why, and it's not a moral flaw, that then you can live a life of not being afraid, and not being afraid that at some moment you'll be confronted by a Christmas cookie or whatever your cues are. Then life becomes much more enjoyable, actually.
So the first head of that monster is serotonin. What's the second head?
Well, the first head would be beta-endorphin. So that's the chemical that takes away pain and makes you feel good about yourself and makes the world feel comfortable and happy. The second is serotonin, which is the just say no chemical and whether you're going to be depressed or not. And the third is your blood sugar. So that if you're sugar sensitive, your blood sugar responds differently from other people. So if you have something sweet, or if you have certain kinds of carbs that don't have any fiber in them, your blood sugar spikes. It goes way, way up, and then it drops. And so when it goes up, you feel really good. So you want to do that. But then when you crash, you feel like the world is ending. And because there are three different things operating, it's like a matrix. And if you try to figure it out, or you try to have points or things like that, you just go crazy because it's way too, one, it's way too subtle, and two, it's too much information, and you just feel like you can't do anything. And one of the dilemmas, and this is true for a lot of people, is that very often sugar-sensitive people are overweight. And so we get pushed into dieting. And dieting is restriction. That's the core of dieting, is restriction and deprivation. So we get taught from the time, I don't know, we're 10 years old, that we need to restrict, and we need to have control, and we need to be good, and it's our fault if we can't. And if we go to medical practitioners, if you meet a doctor who's not sugar sensitive and who says, well, why don't you just, that phrase, why don't you, what's wrong with you? Like, you I know you're lying to me. I just went to the doctor last week and I'm still overweight. You know, you have to be lying. He didn't say that, but I know that's what he was thinking. And I'm laughing because it's like, honey, I do a food journal. I know exactly what I eat. There's something else operating. So by the time we get to be adults, we're pretty well beaten up about it. And so my message is really to not feel so burdened by those external messages and say, oh, here's how you can do it differently, and here's how the sequence that you can do, and you know what you work on first and why, and how you work on blood sugar and serotonin, and you know. So the process would be, first you get your blood sugar steady, and then you'd get your serotonin switch unstuck. So it's a dial, and you can turn it up or down, and you can trust that if you eat a random plate of cookies, you can close your mouth before they hop in. I'm sorry, I just had that image of walking into the kitchen and there's the cookies, and like, nope, you don't get me today. So
That sounds like it could be very, very difficult because in a lot of social situations, especially, there's a lot of pressure or foods that you aren't prepared to face. Do you
Right.
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What are your tips for someone going into a social situation? If my blood sugar is balanced out
Right.
and I've got my serotonin switch unstuck, does it make it easier, or is it still something we have to be extremely mindful of?
I think we have to be mindful, but it's certainly easier. I mean, I have the ability to say no, so I could say to someone, "Oh, that looks wonderful," but I mean, I just make something up, and you can say you're on a diet, and people will leave you alone. It's learning how to have a sense of humor, and to ask ahead of time. What if you're invited to a party? Is it a party? Are you bringing your own food, or are you if everybody's going to an Italian restaurant, for example? That's the worst because it's all pasta. You go and look online and see what the menu is and what you can order, so you're not faced with, in this moment when I'm hungry and tired and 100 people are looking at me, I won't know what to do. And you learn to know, you can order this antipasta and it will be delicious and nobody will think you're weird at all. And even if people think you're weird, you just say, whatever, I'm dieting. It's much easier these days because so many people are gluten-free or doing or doing keto, all the things that people are doing these days. That actually people are much less judgmental than they were 20 years ago.
Isn't it amazing how that changes as education rises about food and food? I agree with you that food is healing. And I would say that, even there are keto people out there they have the same message. Mm-hmm. Food is for you. It's not against you.
Exactly. And because I have people ask me about that all the time. Am I against keto? And I say, well, I'm not against keto because I love the relationship to food and finding good food. The problem is if you're sugar sensitive and you cut out all carbs, 6 weeks down the line, you're going to fall off the cliff and you're not going to know why. And so I say, you can do this and you can adapt it so that you're protecting your particular brain and it's not an all or nothing thing and you don't have to be in fear.
I love how you say protecting your brain. So for me, what I'm hearing you say is you're taking the attention off of the addiction or the food, the good, bad, the judgment, and you're looking at it as a brain health issue. It's removing, like you said, the morality from it and really making it strictly physiological. Well,
I think you start with it being strictly physiological and then you go into the joy aspect of it. So, personally, I think food is wonderful. And the joy of what you can do if you're not constrained by the morality or you're a bad person, but what you can do within these parameters because you want a healthy brain. You don't want to go back to feeling like a crazy person. And, and that grows over time. It's an iterative process. So how you might feel in the first month after you start versus how you feel 5 years later, or now we have people with 20 years of experience, and I can tell you they are not like their friends at all. And the idea that it would be scary to go into a restaurant or go to a party, it's just a non-issue. You just bring your own stuff, or you find it, and everybody wants to eat your stuff because it's so much better. That's the incredible thing, is that suddenly instead of being the bad person, you're the one who has the best stuff in the room. And so you become a leader, and you don't intend it, but it's just, and because you're nice and you're funny and you're not all scrunched up because you're trying to diet again. It's a very different way of life. So
what are the symptoms of sugar sensitivity? If somebody were listening to you right now, Kathleen, and thinking, well, yeah, I have a hard time passing up an entire plate of cookies or a whole bag of chips or whatever. Besides that, what are some symptoms? Because I heard you talk about highs and lows.
Yeah,
There's highs and lows. Some things. So go ahead and tell me what some of those might be.
Well, here's something that's a really interesting thing. I just thought of this. If you've been in therapy for a long time and you're not better, that's a really big cue. because if you're sugar sensitive and you don't do the biochemical part and you just talk, you get very insightful, but you don't get well. You still have a nagging sense of inadequacy. You feel like a fraud. You feel driven by your food choices. You feel like people don't appreciate you. You feel done to. You feel entitled. You blame other people for your problems. Those kinds of markers say, this is sugar sensitivity. And so you can listen to yourself and say, if you've done all that work, why don't you feel great? You know, you shouldn't be in therapy for 20 years and not feel terrific, or even be in therapy for a year, because if you're working with someone on yourself, or you're doing all the things we do, and even if you don't have money, sugar sensitive people tend to want to be better. And so I meet people all the time who've been doing stuff, and they're not just people with money who are going to seminars or doing all the kinds of things that many people do. They're regular people, and they don't understand why after all this work they haven't gotten a payoff. Well, it's because they haven't taken care of the biochemical piece. And I'm usually funny about it. Say, well, let's do this piece. And if you've done all that work and you do the little biochemical piece, then it's sort of like you've had a bowl that's cracked and you've been filling it up for 20 years and the water keeps dripping out, and you fix the crack. I don't know if you've ever seen those Japanese art pieces where they fill the cracks with gold. I love that image because I feel like that's what we're doing, is creating that kind of healing. And then if you have all those skills to fill it up, which many people do, mostly now, it's very interesting, at least in this country, people have an enormous sense of what kinds of healing things will help them. And if they don't have the biochemical piece, they're not well proportionate to the level of work they've done. So if we add in the food piece, then all of a sudden, all that work is just like this bounty of skills and insights and whatever. So it's very satisfying now when to have someone who's like that, because it's a very short term. Or even in 12-step work, you know, what used to take 25 years to get to, if you add this in underneath 12-step work, you're talking about a year of incredible change that's being held. Now, see, I haven't ever thought of that before, but it's very true that if you create that kind of foundation, then the work that you do gets multiplied.
Like accelerated almost.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it. You got this is why I love talking to you. It's sort of like you're just leaping to what the heart of it is. And when people get it, they just want to do it because there's nothing lost. There's nothing painful. It doesn't cost any money. You don't have to sign up for a $1,200 thing in order to do it. It's just, okay, you start having breakfast, cool.
Now, you said there's highs and lows. So do you have almost like a sense of a swinging personality if you're sugar sensitive?
Yes, absolutely. I call it Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And you never know which one you're going to get. It doesn't seem rational that sometimes you're just so funny and so creative and so thoughtful and so generous and so loving. And other times you are just such a brat. And it doesn't make any sense whatsoever until you're taught how to read that. And that's part of what we do, is teach you, all right, here's what's going on. And then you go, oh my gosh, no wonder.
So it's almost like a timeline, right? You're like, okay, as soon as I go Dr. Jekyll, or I don't know which one's the bad guy. Is it Dr. Jekyll?
I don't know. I don't know.
So whatever the bad guy is, you can maybe back it up and see when you had sugar or something that's sugar-based. Like you said, wine. You keep mentioning wine. A friend of mine who does keto was talking about how high in sugar some wines are.
Wine is fermented sugar. They squash grapes. Grapes are pure sugar. I mean, wine is liquid sugar. So yes, absolutely. Yes, you learn how to notice, or it's not only if you have sugar. It's a lot of sugar-sensitive people don't eat and they get high. When you don't eat, your body thinks you're starving, and it releases beta-endorphin to protect you from death by starvation. So at 11 o'clock in the morning, you feel absolutely strong and courageous and brave and ready to take on. And at 11:30, you're crashing. And you don't make that connection until you're taught to notice. And once you start noticing that, then you notice that if you have breakfast, you do better.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of breakfast? Like for me, I don't think I'm sugar sensitive, but I do know that I cannot start my day with like pancakes, just toast. If I go straight carbs for breakfast, even a bowl of decent cereal, I do not feel good. Yeah. Like quickly, within an hour, I'm feeling crummy. I have to start my day with protein. I think everyone should because it's brain food and it's giving your body what you need. But I literally understand not necessarily the highs and lows. It's more of just a crash when I start my day with crummy.
Dropping off a cliff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So both. What I would say is you have both protein and good complex carbs.
I can do carbs with it. You know, I have a question for you, actually, Kathleen. I have found for myself, and this may be something that people can catch on to, different kinds of sugars affect me differently. Mm-hmm. So I don't drink. I had an alcoholic stepfather, and I don't judge people who drink, but my life experience with that, what alcohol did to him was like, I'm good. I don't need that in my life. And so that's not the struggle. But like if I have ice cream, which is milk-based, I'm fine. But if I go and like certain kinds of cakes make me feel buzzed, literally, I had this cheap piece of cake one time at a party, and within 15 minutes, I said to my husband, I swear, I don't even actually really know what buzz feels like because I don't drink, but this is my version. This is my virgin version going, I bet this is what it feels like because my head was buzzing. Is that something that I predicted it was the piece of cake because I was fine until I ate it. Yeah. Junky junk actually can make you feel buzzed, can't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is the craziest feeling.
Yeah. It's, you got it. I mean, that's the reality is it's the same neurochemistry and different. To go back to the ice cream has fat in it. So the fat slows down the sugar effect. If you have a piece of cheap cake, you've got the cake and then you have that sugar frosting, which is like just that stuff.
I really am not a fan of frosting. It has to be like cream cheese frosting. And then
but if you have cream cheese, which is sugar and cheese, then you can get a buzz because you're getting an intense dose. You're getting a hit, literally biochemical hit. So that part of learning to in the morning, if you have some protein so that creates a long-term steady blood sugar level, and you have some complex carbs. So if you have, I don't know, some oatmeal and 2 eggs. And it's interesting. Little people need more to eat than they realize. Little people, so that people who are under 120 pounds, they need to eat more because their brain, they don't have little brains. They have full-size brains. And really big people don't need to have hugely more portions. But so the brain we're essentially dealing with what does the brain need. And that's a fairly reasonable parameter of what will work for people.
That's actually really profound to talk about, it's not your size of your body.
Right.
Because we do tend to think that way, right? Like this big man needs a big meal and that little person eats like a bird. But the reality is maybe the percentage of food varies a little bit, but we all have this need to keep our brain healthy and fed.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So the fats, the proteins, and my own journey, I had a thyroid condition, but I didn't know it. And I thought food was causing my problem. And that's how I learned so much on my own of what worked for me and what didn't. And I think back to your point about, not being against keto, I think each person really does need to understand what their body needs and what percentages, because not everyone can just forego all carbs and just eat meat.
Well,
I don't think that's necessarily the best. I don't want to judge people who do that, but I would say that most people, a balance of, you said, complex carbs and proteins are the healthiest.
I don't even push it to the whole balance thing. I'm so pragmatic. I just know if you're sugar sensitive and you do low carb or no carb, you're treading in very dangerous territory.
Why is that?
Well, because your body, the just say no part comes from the carbs. It's a physiological thing that having the carbs creates the serotonin, and if you don't have the serotonin, then you get into that's dangerous turf. And also that if you have my experience with the carbs is that they soften, how can I say this? They soften the personality. So if you're just having protein and a lot of vegetables, then you're getting carbs. Most people don't do the lot of vegetables part. They just have the protein and it gets sort of high. And they get kind of brittle. I mean, that's my experience. They're kind of edgy and brittle. And so the carbs soften that. Now, can you do that with vegetables? You can, but you have to eat a lot. And most people who are getting high on, this is a generalization, but the people that I know who just love the feeling of just having proteins, they don't want to soften it because they like the zing that they get from all protein and the feeling of confidence and power. I mean, that's a different brain chemical that's being activated. And when I think of balance, I think of how do we have a group in there that's collaborating. So you have fats and you have proteins and you have carbs. And they're working with blood sugar and serotonin and beta-endorphin and dopamine and creating a collaborative, energetic, and you're not doing spiking or crashing or blah, blah, blah. And some people find that very boring. They just don't like to do what I suggest because to them it's not exciting enough. It's sort of like, what do you mean eat 3 times a day? But that's okay because to be honest with you, they'll be back. That's what happens is people, they get bored. This isn't hard enough. Why aren't you telling me where's the diet sheet? And I say, no, that's not how we do it. And they go, oh, I need you to tell me what to eat. And it's like, I'm not going to do that because I want you to learn your body and what your body needs and when it needs it, and for you to feel skilled and competent. So it's very different it's not flashy at all.
It's interesting as you're talking about that person, that's kind of an addiction too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Those parameters can be addicting.
Absolutely. You got it. You're on this. I love talking to you because you're so onto what are the underlying concepts that, and usually people don't think about that. And so to have somebody who's saying, wait a minute, it's probably because you're talking to all these different people and thinking about this from all different directions. But once you get that you can change your life, it's mind-boggling. And it's so deeply spiritual because you have a way to get to know your body differently. And then you have a way, like you have food at your disposal to create balance and create softness or if you go through stress or life takes a turn that's really difficult. And I get people who will write me and say, oh my gosh, my dad just died and I'm feeling overwhelmed. And what do I do? And I'll say, that's grief. And here's what you can do. Eat some chicken noodle soup. Which sounds ridiculous. But then they say, okay, I'm gonna eat chicken noodle soup and then I'll write you back and I'll say, okay. And they come back and they say, that was just what I needed. That helped me. That made me feel comfort. And who's going to say just other than your grandmother? So
me, I always do that. Because it works, doggone it. Homemade especially.
Right, exactly.
Isn't it interesting? What I'm hearing you say is you're taking therapy, big therapy.
Yep.
That's a big word. And you're saying food is therapy when you use it properly. You can misuse food as therapy, like those people who pacify themselves with overeating or not eating. It goes both ways, deprivation or overeating. And you're saying, yes, food is therapy, but not to the detriment of who you are. Food is therapy where you actually get to be friends with food, partner with food, find out what feels good, and that removes that judgment and that harshness about food. Food no longer becomes the thing that you struggle against. It's actually something you get to use like a tool.
Well, like a friend. It's
yeah.
a tool. It's sort of, it becomes your joy, and all of a sudden it's, oh my goodness, I get to have lunch. Like I get to have foods that I love to eat, and the journey to discover what you love and to provide those for yourself. And I had this guy once he was homeless, and he would go to the library and he'd get on the computer, and he was very, very sugar sensitive. He used to carry cans of tuna fish around in his backpack. And so he was learning how to eat what made him feel good with no resources whatsoever. And his life, he's just graduating from graduate school. This is 10 years later. I mean, and that's somebody who learned this key. Like, this key will open up your connection to who your deepest self is. Well, how cool is that? You know?
How do you unlock the guilt to not be afraid of food?
You change what you eat. You don't have to intend it. You don't have to talk about it in therapy. If you change the biochemistry, there is no guilt. There is no remorse. This joy just sort of burbles up. And all that stuff, I mean, that's what I mean about not having, if you're spending 10 years in therapy and you're still guilty, or you have remorse, or you feel conflicted, you need to change the biochemistry. You change that, it just evaporates. Even if you didn't talk to anybody, even if you didn't do any processing, it evaporates because it's biochemically generated. Now, I know that's a very outrageous idea, but I've worked with thousands and thousands of people, and what I used to think was a theory, it's not. Now, it's so true. It's embarrassing. It's so true. Now, when I think about the therapists who get nervous that they'll be out of business, like, you don't have to worry about that either, because then you get to process things from a balanced and a courageous way. All right, let's look at, let's look at how it felt to be 16 and be with somebody who just died from alcoholism, and to know, like 52, how young that is and how stupid that was. Well, now, because I'm balanced and settled, I can go back to that and know how to be with that part of myself that nobody knew then what to do with her. I mean, who even noticed that affected her? You know, and we all carry those things.
I'm a huge proponent of brain science. Number one, neuroscience fascinates me. And the second thing that fascinates me is how our emotions impact us, how they store in our body, how they are constantly in the background, guiding and directing still the decisions we make. There are people in their 60s and 70s that are still powerfully controlled by something back in their childhood.
Absolutely.
It sounds woo-woo, but, you know, as we unlock these keys, and that's what your conversation is so powerful, because it's actually food and emotion together.
Well, that's just wonderful what you're saying. What I have found is that when you change the food, the emotions become authentic. Mm-hmm. And I work with a lot of what I call sugar feelings, which are, you know, feeling that the world is falling in, that you're inadequate, that things are hopeless, that they'll never change. And what I see is that as people change their food, they just go away. Because when you take the sugar out, you don't have feelings like that anymore. And you have grief and sorrow. And you cannot feel as if you're going to die if you lose your dog, for example, which in many ways, it's very interesting that in my experience, when people lose their dog, it's more profound than when they lose their parents or, their grandparents, because the feeling with the dog is so intimate and so non-judgmental. And they have no idea what to do with that. And I'll say, that's grief. If you just sit with it and you wait 18 seconds, that feeling will move through you. And if you're using sugar or you're drinking wine, it gets stuck and it rolls around and it bumps the bumpers and it bumps it again and it bumps it again. If you're not doing those things, then it comes in and you feel this sorrow and then it rolls out just like the waves. And people say, what are you talking about? And I'll say, just try it and see what happens. And then they'll come back and they'll say, that is really weird. Like, how can that be? And so when someone is as tuned in as you are, say, to your feelings, and you have that safety net of knowing you're not going to die, it's going to roll out, count to 18, and you'll start laughing because you will feel like you're going to die. But at the end of 18 seconds, you'll think, oh, okay, that was a feeling.
It clarifies your emotions. And
yes.
You said sugar makes the negative emotions stick. That's essentially what you said.
That's what I said. They stick and they roll around. They sort of keep bumping you and keep poking at you and keep telling you that you're bad and that the world is an awful place and that nobody loves you and that you can't stand this and it's too big, it's too much. And that's not true. Like we don't die. Even very, very, very profound sorrow, not even sadness. Let's talk about sorrow. We don't die from feelings. That we die from believing that it won't change and that there will never be relief. I mean, we can.
The loss of hope.
The loss of hope, the despair. And in my experience on the deepest level, that what the food does is restore hope and washes away despair, that the hope starts rising. We just changed our logo and we have a picture of a star rising over the mountains. And that's what it's about, is that even in the darkest night, light will come and shine. Nobody knows it's that profound. I'm giving you an insight. I'm sneaking in being profound when it looks like we're just changing the logo on the website.
I love what you just said. Good food restores hope and washes away despair. Yeah. It's so counter-cultural to think of food positively.
Yes.
I mean, for the bulk of culture, I follow people that are fitness people, and they're constantly saying it's properly, and they're trying to get people to believe that food is their friend. I think the challenging thing is, I think if I eat that way, I'm certainly not going to look that way, and I think if we can disassociate the food from the appearance and really focus on that balancing who we are and how we feel, we can deal with the external later. But I think sometimes we're looking for a reward with food, some kind of external proof.
I think you hit on something really important, because one of the things that happens is that we do all this healing with people and they come to feel like what it's like to feel alive and safe and confident. And there, I have a weight loss program, and I say to them, don't you want to lose weight? Like, come on, girls. Like, okay, what about that? We can do that. And they say, yeah, we'll get to it. And so that pressure of having to perform or having to be clean I mean, that's the N word now, is it's clean food. We can go and get clean food. Well, my food isn't dirty. And it's said that dirty carrots are really good for you anyway. So I don't want clean food. I want joyful food. I want food that I love. And, and I want my body to decide what to do. And sometimes if you're older, your body may not be all that interested in being
fit and trim and tiny.
Yeah, like it just doesn't have the same call that it might. I'm happy to be alive and to be joyful and not be burdened by that shame.
Shame. I think shame is a powerful emotion, and we have related shame to food for so long.
Yeah.
So breaking that shame, are you saying that if they just trust you and get the book, read the book, get the tips, really begin to understand who you are, it's really a self-introspection thing. It's less of an external do, don't, bad, good.
Yeah. Well, and they can come on the website, because I think it's hard to do stuff by yourself, so that this is why we have all these places for people to talk to each other and to find out, to hear it, like hearing your voice, hearing this kind of dialogue gets you started. But then, your doctor will say, well, don't you want to lose weight? And you don't have an answer for that because you think you're supposed to do that right away. And so having voices, having people who support you and laugh with you and help you, we're talking about relearning a way of being in the world. This is not just, let's try eating differently. We're talking about literally changing your sense of how you are in the world. And, I don't say that out loud often because it's like people say, what are you talking about? And I'll say, yeah, don't worry about it. Just have breakfast and, we'll get there, because you can't imagine what this will bring you. It's not in your frame of reference. And so, we laugh a lot. We have a lot of places for people to laugh and, figure out, well, am I going to have an egg? An egg has all this fat in it. Eat the yolk. Just shut up and eat the yolk.
Amen. Preach the yolk, sister.
Right. Exactly.
YourRadiantRecovery.com is the website that is the resource that you're talking about, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Now, the one question that I didn't cover that's really kind of important, if somebody hearing your voice right now has struggled with alcoholism or is living with someone who struggles with alcohol, this is actually where you started your study, was with people with addiction in sugar.
Yes.
So let's talk about briefly, if someone has substance abuse, how your technique of changing your food affects their success in overcoming their substance abuse.
Okay. When we were testing this, the typical success rate, now that would be being clean and sober, in a typical recovery program is about between 20 and 25%. So 1 in 4. And so we started adding the food into the protocol, and it went up to over 90%. So 9 out of 10 got clean and sober. People who had never been able to get clean and sober were able to get clean and sober and stay that way. And so it was so powerful. It's what started me in doing this. And now in the rooms of AA, I think that what we see is that people still struggle because they're eating lots of sugar and they're not having breakfast and they don't know that can affect how they feel. Excuse me. And if you add this in, it just changes everything. It's like it's the same image of the bowl. If you have a bowl that can be filled up and you're fixing the crack, and then you add in whatever resources, and it really doesn't matter what it is. It can be 12-step, it can be treatment, it can be the programs that they have in churches. It doesn't matter. If you're with people because addiction is a disease of isolation. So being connected with other people who are getting well, and you have this underneath it. So if you're sponsoring someone, you get them to eat. If you're living with someone, you make them a shake in the morning. I mean, these kinds of practical things. And we have a place on the website where we talk about this. We have a little section for people to specifically talk about what do you do if you're living with someone who's dealing with substance abuse, and how can you support them? Because it's slightly different if it's alcohol or if it's cocaine. You know, I listened to this thing about the opioid addiction. So can't remember what year it was. 13 billion pills of OxyContin. 13 billion. So we now have a country of people who are addicted to opioids. It's hidden, it's not talked about. But if you look at a continuum of OxyContin, alcohol, sugar, it's the same continuum. So if we're treating those things, it leads back to being able to say no, being able to hold feelings. I mean, OxyContin allows people to deal with the despair, what we were talking about earlier. And nobody is telling them that this is why they can't get off of it, because if you try to stop, then you feel this global sense of despair and hopelessness. And you can't do that by yourself. So adding the food piece in, you know, it puts like one of those little circle things that African women put on their heads to hold bowls. That's how I think that the food is like a little circle thing, and then you can hold your feelings. It'll hold it steady and the bowl doesn't tip over. So it's not like if you just do the food, you'll be healed from your addiction. But it's if you do the food, then you're able to do the other things that will help you get well.
You do less running from and more being able to cope with? Exactly.
Yes. You're hired.
Okay, when do I start?
you're so on it. It's amazing. Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, this is a really profound conversation because you've covered the idea of mind, body, and spirit. Because when our bodies are telling us things, and sometimes because of our mind and the things we believe, we miscommunicate with our bodies and we give it the wrong things.
Right. And we don't know.
Because we don't know, or it feels good. In the moment, it does feel good.
Well, see, this is exactly that we intuitively are drawn to things that allow us to stay alive. Where it's not that we're bad, it's that we learn if I do this, I can manage. And someone says, well, we're going to take that away. And then the reaction is, what am I going to do? And what I'm doing is coming along and saying, I'll trade you. You know how with the dog?
Yeah.
The dog has your wallet and you want it back and the dog doesn't want to give you the wallet. So you have a really cool toy and you'll say, here, you can have this. Give me the wallet. And the dog says, oh, that looks really good. So it's like that, where we're offering something actually of greater value and saying you can let go of that and not be afraid and not be alone and not feel like you're in a wilderness and you don't know what to do when your therapist doesn't know anything about it, your doctor doesn't know anything about it. I mean, that's why this is so revolutionary, is that the medical field hasn't caught up. You know, my doctor says to me, oh, would you like me to send you to a dietitian? Dear God, you've got to be kidding me. That's not what I want. I don't have I have a therapist who gets all of this. And so she says, what are you eating? Don't call me unless you've had your breakfast.
We will not talk until you've had a good meal.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
This is a very profound conversation, and I think life-changing because so many people are in bondage to their relationship with food. And then it extends out to people who are living with addiction or people who are addicted to other substances, and
right.
recognizing how food is medicine in this context. It sounds too simple, But we have covered a lot of ground in the last hour. And if you had to give someone, 3 things that you really want them to pay attention to, yes, their mind might be bouncing around like a ping pong ball, right? Or like that pachinko game, where it's like all over the place. What 3 things can they really grab onto and begin this journey, either for themselves or for someone they love?
Eat breakfast with a protein and a good carb. Go to the website at radiantrecovery.com so you can learn more stuff. And number 3, get the book, because almost everything that I just said with you, it doesn't have your brilliant insight in it, but it has the roadmap that I've been talking about in very specific detail of what to do in what order, how to do it, how to laugh at yourself, how to understand the neurochemistry. Because you don't have to understand anything in order to be able to heal. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to remember anything. You just get the book and open up to, here's step 1. There's 7 steps. And that's the joy. And the new book is very funny. It's a redo, and we've added why you're like this, and then what happens if you do it. So we now have a roadmap of, when you do it, this is how your life will change.
I love all of these amazing, powerful things that you have shared with us today. Some of it is so common sense, and that might be why people will not believe it.
Right.
But I think we would say to them, just trust and try it and see for yourself, right?
You don't even have to trust.
Just do it.
You have to make no commitment whatsoever other than simply doing it. Because you could think it's stupid, you could think it's ridiculous, you could not trust it. If you do it, you won't be in bondage. You'll be free. And then you'll laugh. You'll come and laugh with us, and you'll say, whoa, those girls had something to say. That was pretty cool.
Oh, I love that. If you do it, you won't be in bondage. You will be free.
Yep.
That is powerful.
Good job. You called it out. What can I say?
Powerful. Kathleen, I want to thank you so much for reaching out to me through your publicist and giving me the opportunity to share this powerful information, because I do believe this literally could change the world.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Today I've been talking with Kathleen DesMaisons. She's a PhD. She's the president of Radiant Recovery. She's also the author of the best-selling book, Potatoes, Not Prozac, Simple Solutions to Sugar Addiction, which is out now. And if you happen to be driving or somewhere without a pen, head on over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 112. I will have hyperlinks to Kathleen, to her website, and to her book to save you time and effort. And while you're there, please leave me your name and email address. Join my tribe. I will send you a gift. And also, if you listen in on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or Stitcher, please subscribe, please comment, rate, and share this information with someone. The whole point of this resource that is Feminine Roadmap is to get a message out. And how much better to get a message out than you tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends, and so on, like that 70s shampoo commercial. So come on, ladies, share the message. Help us change lives. And as always, I want to thank you for giving us your time, your energy, and your ears. Please know that you are valuable. You're worth it, and we love you. Have a wonderful week this week, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.